Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
The Bhagavad Gita is the most fascinating introduction to spirituality because the backdrop of the Gita is a battlefield. A battlefield not just between enemies but between brothers. And bang in the middle of the battlefield, the most sublime philosophy was taught by Krishna to Arjuna, his dear friend. And it brings about one of the most important messages that the Gita gives to us, gifts that it gives to us, is an expansion of the mind. It has this mind-stretching quality because it presents opposites, paradoxes. For instance, Arjuna believes that he should give up the world and retire to the Himalayas, forests, to meditate. It is Krishna who tells him, you have to fight and kill. Then when he is ready to fight and kill, he says, you must do it without any hatred. If you think action is the way to go about life, then he preaches renunciation in action, a fascinating thing. How do you practice renunciation in action? You can renounce action, but what do you renounce and how do you act is the question. If you think being passive is spirituality, Krishna advocates a very strong sense of assertiveness. If you think simplicity is the way to live life, he says, no, the world is there for you to enjoy. Suppose you want to go the opulent way, he says, more is less. The more you have, the less you enjoy. So on and so forth. So, he speaks of having wonderful relationships, but in a detached manner. He speaks of acting wholeheartedly, but without attachment. How do you marry the two opposites together is a fascinating subject. And today we are lucky to embark on the Bhagavad Gita, the very first chapter, where Arjuna is overwhelmed by life and life's challenges. And many of us get overwhelmed by life's challenges, not many, most of us. And then comes the breakdown. But unlike us, Arjuna has the luxury of an enlightened soul to ask questions to. But before that, it has to occur to him that he can't handle his life and that he needs help. Many of us don't even arrive at that first step. Most of us think, oh, I can handle life. And then when we are faced with challenges, we break down. So it must occur to us that I need help and I need to ask for help. The next step is to learn with an open mind, to set aside certainty, pride and arrogance and say, I don't know, and approach the teaching with an open mind. If you do that today, the teachings of Krishna will come alive to you. Today and the next 4 days. And then, when you listen with an open mind, you then need to experiment with what you have heard or learned. apply it in your life, see that it works, and then transform your life for the better. Then you can handle life's challenges. But the next question is there something beyond the world? Who has created this fantastic world? Who has created this moon and the stars and the sun? Who is behind this? Who or what is behind this? And then that conviction comes that I must embark on this journey of exploration and find out that which I don't know. Because until I know that, my life is futile, an empty, hollow nothingness. This is called mumukshatva. Once you have this mumukshatva, you don't rest content till you get the answers by yourself, and then it is that you realize the purpose and the mission of your life was only to find this. So, before we actually get on with the verses, every day for these 5 days, we'll take the important lessons from the Gita. Why are we taking this? Because the Gita consists of 701 verses. And to cover the entire Gita is a Herculean task. Many of us give up. So, in this modern era where you need sound bites, you want little clips, you don't have the patience to go through it, we'll give you little clips, lessons from the Gita. The very first lesson that we learn is that your intellect must guide, supervise, and control the wayward mind. So the intellect has to be greater than the mind. That's the first lesson we learn. And perhaps the last lesson that most spiritual seekers apply in their lives. We never learn it. In this first chapter, we're going to see how Arjuna, a man of outstanding caliber, a warrior, the commander-in-chief of the Pandava forces, just breaks down in a matter of minutes. How? Because he succumbs to emotion. We all have emotions, and we must have emotions. But these emotions must always be under the control of the discriminating intellect. The moment you allow the emotion to overpower you, what happens to you is what has happened to Arjuna. And that's not a nice thing. Once you succumb to your own emotions, then you face problems in life. You can't deal with anything. And the tendency is to blame something, someone outside you. As long as you are blaming somebody outside you, you will never ever solve the problem. Because the root cause of the problem is that you have allowed your own intellect to get overwhelmed by emotion. Plain and simple. Whether it is eating your favorite food, whether it is a relationship, particularly that of a mother with a child, or two lovers, or anything, where the emotion is very strong and the intellect is tottering, not up to the challenge, then you succumb. And as long as you're blaming somebody else, you can never get to the solution. You have to accept that if I am suffering, it has to be something in my own mind that's causing this suffering. Because, for the simple reason, the Gita continuously tells us, human being that you are designed to be the chef-d'oeuvre of creation. You are the masterpiece. You're the conqueror. You're the master of the universe. As a human being, you're designed in such a way that nothing in the world can disturb you. If you are disturbed, only you can disturb yourself. So if you accept it and look within, you'll find intellect is not there and the mind is just taken over. It's like a tsunami that creates devastation in its wake. Wherever it goes, it just destroys and devastates. The mind is like that. So, let's first take a look at what is the basic difference between the mind and the intellect, because both are thoughts. Now, before we come to that, The physical body is our outer personality. That really doesn't have an impact on your performance, just as in a car. The body of the car needs to look beautiful, maybe it needs to be aerodynamic, but beyond that, the performance of the car is not dictated by the body of the car. The fuel in all cars is the same. So what really makes the difference in the performance is engine and driver. Two very important components. Now let's take a look at us. The physical body really doesn't make a difference to your performance. The spirit in all of us is the same. So what makes the difference is the engine and the driver of your personality. The engine is the mind, the driver is the intellect. Both mind and intellect consist of thoughts. But there's a huge difference. The same thought in an indecisive form, in a fluid form, is the mind. And the thought in a decisive form, in a firm, stable form, is the intellect. So the mind is the domain of feelings and emotions. The intellect is the domain of discrimination and judgment, logic. The mind is full of loves and hates, likes and dislikes, whims and fancies. The intellect is based on analysis, discretion, discrimination. The mind is driven by impulse. Suddenly you get an impulse and you act. There is no reason, it's just impulse. Whereas the intellect is backed by reason, clear logic and reason. Therefore, the mind is called the irrational aspect, irrational mind, and the intellect is called the rational mind. Now, why is it important for us to use the intellect? Because we as human beings have two wonderful gifts bestowed on us. One, choice of action. To be vegetarian or non-vegetarian is a choice that only you and I have. No tiger has that choice. No cow has that choice. We have a million choices before us. And we get confused because we don't know what to choose. In order to help us choose the right thing, we have also been gifted with the intellect. So if you have a strong intellect, you can use this gift of choice of action judiciously and choose that which is the right thing for you, that which is in your interest, that which will promote your growth, and then have a smooth ride in life. But what's happening nowadays is that we are all making choices with a poorly developed intellect. See, choice is a given. From childhood, from birth onwards, you have this choice. But intellect does not come automatically. You are born with an intellect, but you need to put in effort to develop it, to strengthen it, to fortify it. And we, number one, don't like to put in that effort. Number two, we don't know how to put in that effort. Most human beings don't even know they have a thing called intellect. So you end up making the wrong choices, disastrous choices, sometimes fatal choices. If you go back into your life and go back to the root of all your problems, you will come to this conclusion that I made the wrong choice because I did not have the intellect at that time. Animals don't have a problem, they have no choice, no intellect, their life is chalked out for them. So now the purpose of life is to make your mind work for you and not against you. If you don't use your intellect, the same mind will work against you. An ungoverned mind is your enemy. The same mind, if it is governed properly, supervised properly, directed properly, becomes a tremendous blessing, becomes a friend. And that which governs the mind is the intellect. Take a look at your emotions. Any emotion unchecked leads to disaster. Even if it is a positive emotion, love. Mother, child. Every mother loves her child. But not every mother is a good mother. Because Most mothers allow the emotion to dictate the behavior with the child. So they spoil them rotten. And then when that child becomes a devil, and they complain, oh, my 17-year-old son fights with me, my daughter is rebellious, she does what she wants, so on and so forth. Every parent of a teenage child is stressed out because of this. Who is to blame? The parent herself. What's gone wrong? Emotion overtaken the intellect. However much you love the child, when the child needs to be disciplined, when the child needs to be guided, it's your intellect that needs to come in place and sometimes take harsh decisions for the benefit of the child. How many of us have the courage to do that in any relationship? So, husband, wife, same thing. That is why, because the intellect is not in place, every relationship is crumbling. Every relationship has a problem. So it's not that it breaks up. Many relationships don't break up externally, but internally they're all in pieces because of this. So in the Mahabharata, the entire Mahabharata is an external depiction of an internal phenomenon. The conflict that takes place between the Pandavas and the Kauravas is the conflict that is taking place in the hearts and souls of each one of us, between our own positive tendencies and our own negative tendencies. And Dhritarashtra, the father of the Kauravas, the Gita begins with Dhritarashtra speaking. Dhritarashtra was born blind. And it was not just his physical eyes that he did not have. He was blind to the evil that his sons were committing. He was blind to his own conscience. He himself was confused as to what is right and wrong. And it is a rudderless leader like Dhritarashtra that led to the whole devastation and destruction. And you can see that happening now. Where is the leadership in our country? Where is the leadership in a community? Where is the leadership in our city? And in our families, there is no leadership. Because all of us are blind like Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra represents the mind. Dhritarashtra married Gandhari. Gandhari could see. But the moment she married Dhritarashtra, this is what the story is. She blinded herself. She chose to blind herself. And the product of a blind Dhritarashtra and a blinded Gandhari were 100 evil sons. Gandhari represents the intellect, which has the capacity to see. But when you get infatuated with an emotion, when you get clouded by an emotion, that intellect which has the capacity to see gets blinded. Who has a blind mind and a blinded intellect is devastation and destruction. And it's happening. So many people ask, how old is the Mahabharata? How old is the Bhagavad Gita? It doesn't matter because it's timeless. What it spoke of then 5,000 years ago is very much alive in our lives today. And that is the message to us. So if we learn the teachings of the Gita, maybe we will be able to get this blinded intellect to see properly, to guide our life properly, to guide the mind and the senses properly, so that we reach our destination safely, our goal safely. The mind is like fog. You know, when there's dense fog in Delhi, all flights are cancelled, all trains are cancelled, even cars can't move. And this is what happens to us. You come to a dead halt when the mind overtakes your personality. The fog index is very high. The intellect is like fog lights. Even when the fog is high, you switch on, you apply your intellect, you can see something. And then consistent application of the intellect removes the fog completely. You have clear sight. Clarity of thinking is something that is valued the world over. So what does the mind do? It imagines things. You imagine, this is a disease that we all suffer from. You imagine that your greatest benefactor is your enemy. And you fight those people who are doing you the maximum good. You ill-treat them, you're nasty to them, and eventually you lose them. And who are you left with? All the scoundrels of the world. You see this over and over again. This happens in politics, this happens in families, this happens in corporate life. You know why? Because we fall for flattery and pleasantry. People who really mean well can't be bothered being pleasant. And the truth, they just speak the truth. The truth is very often unpalatable. So you reject these people. So you imagine things. The intellect has the capacity to see reality. And here in the Gita, we're talking about the absolute reality. If you can't see things as they are, you see what happens is when your mind is full of prejudices, biases, likes and dislikes, whims and fancies, you don't see what is out there. You see what you want to see. And that's the problem. Then the mind tricks you. The mind cheats you and takes you for one big ride, and before you know it, it dumps you. The intellect is that which has the capacity to guide you. The tricking, Othello strangled his own dear wife, who was the purest specimen of humanity that Shakespeare projected. Strangled her to death on a mere suspicion, just because he found his mother's handkerchief with some other guy. It tricks you. Othello was tricked. And when he came to know the truth, he couldn't bear to live himself and killed himself. So death and devastation take place. See, this is portrayed, this extreme is